in this chapter, we're seeing quite a lot of the background of the world. So she's building the world of the school. It's the classical. Well, it's classically the upper class English public school that we're seeing.
Yes.
So it's got traditions. It's got the castle. It's got a lot of history.
Houses,
the ghosts in particular, representing history back. And so in a lot of ways, it's the classic fantasy of what an English public school would be like. We see quite a lot of significant developments, the sorting into houses, and in particular the fact that Harry could easily fit into Slytherin, but that Harry finds this repulsive. And we also get from Dumbledore, in addition to a bit of humorous banter and a few words of strange nature,
yes,
we get the one significant
oddment. What does oddment mean?
Oddment. It's a scrap, an extra little piece.
So you'd be like, what's this oddment doing on your desk or something?
No, there are a series of oddments, bits and pieces. The important thing in that announcement is clearly the fact that the corridor is out of bounds, which is going to be highly significant for the plot later on. And also we meet the staff, Snape in particular. It's interesting that the reaction to Snape includes a burning in Harry's scar, which is a little bit odd, but
it's not what you want, is it?
Well, no, it's not so much that. The thing is that the burning in the scar is generally a signal that Voldemort is somewhere about, and it's not Quirrell, but Snape that gives him that. So it puts us immediately on our guard against Snape.
But it's actually Quirrell the back of Quirrell's head, the turban, that's giving Harry that reaction.
Okay.
When Harry looks up at the staff table, Quirrell's talking to Snape, and so Harry can only see the back of Quirrell's head. And so cleverly, that's what's staring at him.
I'd missed that.
Ugh.
Okay.
Nasty Voldy hiding in a turban, smelly turban. Okay. Well,
okay. I have a question for you to ask.
Say that again, because I talked over you.
No. I have a question for you. I was trying to think. We've said a lot about the various different worlds and things like that in past episodes of this podcast. The way she's introducing us to the wizarding world, all of those sorts of things.
The mundane stuff of the Muggle world.
Yeah, the contrast between the mundane and the Muggle. And in some sense, this is more of the same. So what do you see as being different in this particular thing? What's she trying to do differently in the Sorting Hat episode from what we've seen before? Very big picture.
Well, I think the Great Hall is this huge, expansive space, and I was thinking about, as in terms of what purpose it serves in the narrative, it's like creating an internal sense of the world broadening out through the use of an external space. The ceiling is enchanted so you can see the stars. It's very opulent. In a way, what's actually difficult about writing a fantasy story like this, where you're in a magical world, is kind of constraining and bounding what could happen. The use of the setting, I think, and the Great Hall, kind of, what is Hogwarts? That's kind of one of the first things you think about, is the Great Hall. It kind of is where all the houses are together. It's not a class. It's not Quidditch. It's the Great Hall. It's where everybody comes together and where the headmaster gives his speeches. And the Sorting Hat, it's this communal space. It's her way of constraining a fantastical world which seems to have no limits. So it's this balance you have to walk as the writer when you have magic in your world. I'm trying to think how to phrase this. It's like sort of concentric circles in which there are different stakes, and the scale is different. So there's the implication of the big wide world of magic in Britain. Then within that, there's Hogwarts and Hogsmeade. She's gradually constraining us more and more to sort of put everything in context. And so I think what's different with entering the Great Hall, that's even a circle within Hogwarts, and more constraining. More and more we're getting structure as to how the world operates and the rules of magic. But in terms of what narrative function the Great Hall has, I think here it's Harry and the others crossing that threshold from childhood into adolescence. And so the expansiveness of this space is very important for sort of describing an inner feeling that the children have. It's like in a story, I was thinking of Lord of the Rings, when they're in the Mines of Moria, and I'm thinking more of the film because I haven't read it in ages, but Gandalf takes them into this huge grand hall, and he's like, I think we can risk a bit of light, and he makes the light brighter, and it illuminates. His light looks small in the scale of this enormous hall. I was like, why would a writer use enormousness, like why use space in these moments? And I thought it's a psychological and emotional journey for the character. Like it's using an external space to get the characters and the reader to feel that inner space.
Okay, I can tell you two things. The one is, if you have a small light then the amount of darkness that you can see around the edge of the light is relatively small. If you expand the light and you make it brighter, then the area of darkness that you can see is correspondingly greater. And the more you expand the light, the more darkness you are exposed to. Now that's a commonplace about science. The more you know, the more you know you don't know. And it's the same here, that when they're walking down a narrow tunnel in the Mines of Moria, and there's no light, they only know a little bit about what's around them. And as they get into the larger space and the light expands, then the potential danger from the darkness is increased correspondingly to this amount of darkness that you can actually see. So
that's lovely. It's dangerous, but it's also what's been lost. It's like the you're in this little tunnel, the rubble is everywhere and it's a mess because it's a fallen place. But once Gandalf reveals the grandeur of what the dwarves built down here, it's like, wow, it's a whole civilization they built down here. But it's also, as you say, it's like the danger of like what was the price
what could be lurking in that utter darkness.
Ian McKellen chills here.
Yes, although she does that very well in this particular episode, because
did you think that? How would you answer your question?
Let's carry on.
Okay,
let's carry on down the line you've started, because I think it's a good line.
Okay.
Which is the creation of the tension that she's doing here by bringing it in very strictly from Harry's point of view.
Yes.
And Harry's point of view is mainly one of ignorance. First of all, he's terrified because he might be asked to perform magic tricks, and it's clear that all of the first years are in the same position. Hermione is reciting bits of spells that she's learnt off by heart. Ron is afraid he's going to be wrestling a troll. All of the others are looking white and nervous, and Harry is the most nervous of them all. So it's a very threatening, unknown environment.
Yes.
As I said, it's got a huge amount of history, which is symbolised by the building, particularly by the ghosts and the traditions of the ghosts. I like the fact that nearly Headless Nick, I think it was, who hadn't been able to eat for 400 years.
Yes, and he has to keep coming to these feasts with all this beautiful food.
Yes. And So I think that the way she's handled that transition, and that she's handled this world building in this environment, and as you say, it's constrained because you can see the scope and scale of what she's up to in that scope. That's that huge scale, and indeed. She's introduced us to these kids who are very much children at this point. They're 11 years old or whatever, and they are nervous. They are uninformed as to what to expect. And so as a reader, we have the same sense of feeling, the same sense of menace.
It's like the unknown and structure at the same time. And the sort of norms of the school, like Percy is a perfect example, perfectly prefectly.
Percy, the perfect prefect.
He's a perfect example of somebody who just is so au fait with, he's in love with the structure and the sort of norms of this place, and it's it makes total sense. He's a prefect. I really love Percy in this. I don't know. I just think she draws him really well.
And that's the other thing that she brings in this stuff. There's quite a bit of humour in it.
Yes.
You have Dumbledore's few words. You have Nearly Headless Nick. You have Percy being very pompous and condescending.
And Harry says, "If only there was a house for people who felt faintly queasy," or whatever.
Yeah. So very.
Neville getting dropped out of the window by his uncle or whatever.
Yes, and also that he's. Walks off with a sorting hat.
Yes.
So there's actually a lot of humour in this, intercut with this sense of menace and threat and the unknown, and this sense of history. So it's a very complicated,
very rich
and complex piece of writing.
It really is, and I think her pacing. You're talking about the use of humour. It's incredible, really, how she shifts gears between grandeur, enormous scale. She sort of levels down to the level of the children, where they're listening to Seamus. When you spend time with certain characters in a story, it changes the mood and the atmosphere. So you pick characters to spend time with in the story to change the mood and the atmosphere for the reader. So it's like spending time with Seamus and Neville and listening to Neville talking about getting hung out of a window and his uncle Algie getting a meringue and that and dropping him. It's like that's a really it's a mood, and I think it really slows the pacing of the flow of action down, like a river rounding a bend, a gentle bend, and you're getting these long descriptions of the food, which are brilliant, very kind of Tolkien, aren't they?
Yes.
And it serves the function, I think, of slowing things down. And again, it's like it goes back to what you said about, is she doing it on purpose or is it just because it's pleasant? It obviously is both, but the result is that when we get that Snape moment, I think that
yes, it absolutely hits you, because it's in contrast to to what has been a peaceful. So we have three main climaxes in this chapter. The one is Harry's sorting. The second is the Snape moment, and the third at the end, when you have the nightmare with the temptation to go to Slytherin. And that's an interesting one too, because we're told at the end that Harry never remembered that. And that's an interesting thing about viewpoint writing, because it means that you're in the moment, in that viewpoint, but had Harry never remembered it, you're stepping out of viewpoint into the narrator's head, which is unusual for her. She doesn't do that very much. She sticks very, very close to the viewpoint to Harry's viewpoint.
It's like that one opening she does in Deathly Hallows, or one of those, where she kills the groundskeeper. She's with Voldemort, and but I believe that's a dream that Harry does remember. Actually, he accesses Voldemort's head at that moment. But yeah, you're right. It's something that it's a little pocket of information that the reader retains, but Harry loses.
That's right, and it's very, and as I say, in terms of her style, that departure from the character's viewpoint is sufficiently unusual for it to be something that we should note.
But like with Quirrell, she's kind of folding it in to kind of it's a note of uneasiness, like what happened when looking at Snape triggers his scar. And it's kind of like, okay, but then we kind of forget it and it moves. The current carries us on, but it's like it's this drop of unease. And the next chapter is obviously going to be about Snape, the potion master, and she's just setting up some disquiet. It's like there's something
she's
very
definitely
disquieting.
prefiguring the disquiet of Snape, and Snape is an ambivalent character right through the series to the end.
She actually loads every antagonist into that dream. I think she's got Malfoy laughing at Harry when he can't get the turban off his head. Snape is there as well.
Yeah.
And Voldemort is laughing. So she's got all of his antagonists like folded into that one dream.
Yes. And as we said earlier, there's some very significant plot elements in this. We learn about the Forbidden Forest, why it's dangerous, why it's forbidden. We contrast that with the Forbidden Corridor with no explanation, and Percy being horribly miffed that the prefects haven't even been told what's going on.
Yeah.
We have to learn this together with the riffraff.
The ghost, I mean, that's interesting what you say about the ghosts, because that makes total sense, but while I was reading it I was actually thinking, why are there ghosts? Like, I know that they serve a plot purpose, Moaning Myrtle, and then later in the series there's another ghost that's significant, but I sort of thought, why
Well, it's because it's a kid's story, isn't it?
Yeah, I sort of felt a bit like she's got a magical setting, so she's sort of just like bunging in.
No, I think
lots of magical elements. I was like, why would you use ghosts? But I think it's exactly as you say. It's like the ancientness of Hogwarts.
Yes, and the ghosts are actually quite sinister in some way.
Go on.
Yeah, if you think about it, when you meet these ghosts, remember when nearly Headless Nick puts his hand on Harry's arm. It feels like a bucket of cold water, of iced water, and you have the Bloody Baron. They're all covered. He's all covered in blood. Nick has been almost beheaded. So there is some sense in which these rather friendly ghosts are also symbols of a gruesome past, and
that's brilliant. Yeah.
And as I say, they link us to the history of Hogwarts, or one presumes that, one doesn't know, but one presumes that they are ghosts from Hogwarts rather than imports. But what the hell?
I think it's important that they're in a school. It reminds me a bit of, did you ever see the film Dead Poets Society? Robin
Yes,
Williams
I did.
film? And do you remember at the beginning where he shows the kids the photos of the previous students, and he's like, he says that they're telling to seize the day, like gather you birds while you may. And so to have, this is their first day, their first experience of Hogwarts, it's kind of like having death sat at the table with them while they're eating. They're sort of tucking into this food. It's like a wonderful feast, and then having a dead person sort of talking to you, sat next to you, like looking at you eating, being like, oh, I wish I could eat. I don't know, I guess it's like a reminder of mortality and the fact this is the start of a journey that, into adolescence and adulthood.
I wonder if she thought of all this when she was.
I was wondering that. Well,
starting
that's what I was kind of finding myself thinking. I was like, why are these ghosts here? And I was like, well, it ends up having a lot of interesting kind of implications. I don't know.
Yeah, it's very interesting to know how much people's a writer's conscious of what they're actually doing.
Part of it must just be, I'm just having fun, and this is just what my imagination is sort of throwing up, and then Skid gets analysed, and it's like, oh, there's actually some quite interesting things I hadn't really consciously intended.
That's right. She's writing out of a very educated subconscious.
Yes, lovely. Yeah. Can I just say one last thing about the ghosts? You know, when they come in, did you ever see that thing that went viral recently over lockdown, which was Jackie Weaver? You have no authority here, Jackie Weaver. It was a local council meeting on Zoom.
I didn't see it, but
I just recently rewatched that. But doesn't it, like, the ghosts, there is a sinisterness to the ghosts, but there's also something very funny about them, because they're drifting through totally oblivious to this group of kids who've never seen ghosts before, and they're sort of having this little debate in their little society, being like, oh, for God's sake, you know, we've tried too many times, he's had too many chances. They're talking about Peeves and whether he can be part of. I'm not sure.
He's not even a real ghost. He's a poltergeist.
Yes, and it's like nearly had this Nick sort of trying to come across, you know, to be taken seriously, but you just get the impression it's generation after generation of students who are just like, you're nearly headless Nick. He's like, oh God, why do I even bother? So there's something like a bit officious about the ghosts as well. You know, like they've got their own little clique. You know, Percy. So Percy's going to end up being. He's going to end up being a government, basically a government. What would you call it? I was trying to think of what you call it. You know, Mrs. Dalloway. Like, isn't her husband like a government?
An official of sorts, functionary.
Functionary, but like there's like a.
But he's a Weasley, so he's okay.
He's a good one, but he goes a bit wrong for a bit there. But it's like that. It's very much like a public school boy, isn't he? Like, you know, he's very institutionalized. Like.
Absolutely,
and he flourishes in a structured environment. To his own detriment. Like, he stops sort of thinking for himself a little bit. But he's a brilliant foil to Fred and George, obviously.
Yes, and Ron's somewhere in the middle between them. Ron means well and so on. Although he too goes off the rails a little bit at some point. Okay, going back a little bit to the classic sort of school story elements in this thing. We've got the castle, we've got secret passages, we've got the history, we've got the ghosts, we've got I called excessive posh. You called it. I said it was rather posh, but you had a much better word for it. I can't remember.
Was this in reference to Draco or something?
No, this was in reference to the Great Hall. It's affluence.
Yes.
Affluence.
Oh yeah,
extreme
like opulent.
Opulence. That's the word you use.
Yes, and don't they describe? She describes the lanterns on the wall, or the
sconce lights. Yes,
as being like Gringotts.
Yes.
So that reminded me of something you'd said, where you were saying about it's harkening back to you talked about the parchment paper in an earlier chapter, and how it's speaking of Hogwarts as like this other world. It's it's so different. It couldn't be more different from the Dursleys
and
the Muggles. You know, it's this old feel. It's like that. Gringotts is like that. Diagon Alley is like that.
Yes, it has a sort of traditional aspect to it. You've got the interhouse rivalry. You've got the intimidating nature of the environment. All of those things, and it's all these things could appear in almost any school story, from Storky and Company through
Muggies and the Gang.
Yeah, all of those.
Jimbo and the Bad Lot.
Yes, but this is amplified by the magic. So all of these elements, which are appealing from a fantasy world point of view, are kind of doubled down with the magic and the potential for almost anything to happen. So it is really, and as you say, putting it into such a well-known context makes the magic even more powerful in the way it appeals to our imagination. We can see this. Everybody's been to school. Well, most of us have been to school. And our schools were generally fairly boring places, where if you got excited about anything at all, it was probably about something they were trying to teach you.
What? It was about the tuck shop opening. No.
Exactly. But in this particular case, we're seeing a school that's been stretched and expanded to have all these additional elements, so that outside of the schoolwork and all the stuff, that routine that goes on in the school, you have these additional fantasy elements. And all of us would like to go to a school like that, wouldn't we?
Yes, and I mean, it's interesting, but I think that's it's a feature of the fact that she's bolted everything onto that central conceit that the world sort of has a limit to how much it can work once you get out of Hogwarts. Like, it all has to kind of come back to the school or be in reference to the school, and secret passages that lead back to the school. You know, if you stray too far, it sort of starts to dissolve a little bit because those parameters and boundaries aren't in place, and so it becomes very unwieldy, I think, as an author. And that's not any fault of her own. It's because the world is built from the inside out. The school is the centre of it.
That's right. Especially in the earlier, in the first books of the series. Clearly, when you get to the point at the end of the series, when they're going on the expeditions out and camping in the woods and things like that, and even when they go to, is it Black's house?
Shrieking Shack. Oh yeah,
Sirius Black.
Grimmauld Place. Yeah.
Yes. So you do have ways out, but as you say, they're all linked, or whether it's by Floo.
Yes, and everyone you encounter in those spaces is a Hogwarts graduate who's got some beef from the past with Snape, from being at school with Snape. You know, and in a way, I don't know how to frame this. Like, it's I don't mean it as a criticism by any means, but it's like the scope of the world and the scope of its characters is a little bit constrained. You know, the adult characters are a little bit always in reference to having been students, you know, because it's told from that point of view so superbly. It's not a bad thing, but it's just that you can see everything is through that lens. Is that a bit too strong?
No, I think that's absolutely fair.
It's like Lupin's backstory when we meet him. Everything you come to understand about Lupin is in reference to him as a student. Snape is the same. Harry's parents are the same.
Sirius Black is the same.
Hagrid's the same. So it's like every single adult, probably with exception of McGonagall. I don't think, we don't know much about her. But it's kind of through Hogwarts that you understand anybody. What did they do when they were at Hogwarts? And that gives you the kind of answer to who they are now. But that makes that perfect, because it's a story about how a school makes you who you are.
Yes, it definitely has a strong central anchor, yes. And that's what you want.
And you talked about that there's not the sinister, but there's incredible pressures on the students. When they come in through that door, it's like, oh God, step into the unknown. It's kind of like life, isn't it? It's like, how are you going to deal with it? Do you know what I mean? Like that's what Hogwarts sort of represents, isn't it? It's like there's all this wonder, but a lot of people don't do very well. Like Snape, Voldemort, Tom Riddle, Malfoy. Some people, you can give them all the same chance. In a way, I mean, arguably getting sorted into Slytherin kind of narrows things down a little bit. But
I mean,
what did you make of Harry saying he didn't think they were a very nice lot? Is that pure prejudice? When he looks over at the Slytherin table and he thinks,
well, they
didn't look very nice.
No, I think it's a halo effect.
Oh dear. Everyone he loves has said that they're horrible.
No, I think it's a halo effect. The fact that they are associated with Malfoy, and he's never met anyone so nasty as...
So powerful is Malfoy's repellent nature.
Malfoy, look, let us be frank about Malfoy. He is even nastier than Dudley. And so therefore it's no surprise that anything associated with Malfoy, in Harry's mind at least, is going to be suspect. I was interested in the song that the Sorting Hat sings. It's where we find out about the houses, and we don't actually hear a lot about. We know Slytherin, we know Gryffindor in the books, but we don't actually hear a lot about either Ravenclaw or Hufflepuff. And the Sorting Hat actually gives the characteristics of the houses. So Gryffindor, brave, daring, chivalrous. Hufflepuff, just and loyal and hard-working. I mean, let's face it. You can see
Here we
why.
go. The Hufflepuff slagging begins.
I'm not slagging Hufflepuff, but you can see why
It's probably not the most,
it's not the most dynamic and exciting place to be, is it?
Well, I think J.K. Rowling said something very beautiful. She said her daughter had said that everybody wants to be a Gryffindor, but everybody should want to be a Hufflepuff.
Yes, exactly. Ravenclaw, obviously wit and learning, and Slytherin. I thought what the hat says relatively little about Slytherin, except to say that they are cunning and they are ruthless. Not in quite those words, but the Sorting Hat does not know who Harry is. He has no.
Oh, that's interesting.
The hat has no knowledge of Harry's history. It works purely on a snapshot of the person at the time.
Yeah.
So it looks at we see its method on Harry. Clearly, when it sorts the Weasleys into Gryffindor, it sorts the Weasleys into Gryffindor individually. Because Ron doesn't know he's going into Gryffindor. Malfoy is confident of being in Slytherin, and you can see why, because there is a sort of ruthless will to win in Malfoy. And he sees he's an elitist from way back and something of a snob. So you can see why he gets sorted into Slytherin, because
But he clearly desperately wants to be there. That's the other thing. It's like if you want to be somewhere, I wonder if there's a degree to which the Sorting Hat would be like, I know you want to be in Slytherin.
Yep.
But you're going in Hufflepuff.
And what about Neville? How come Neville gets sorted into Gryffindor? It's interesting because it's clearly a difficult decision for the Hat.
Well, it was actually, I think it was Seamus who it takes ages to think.
Neville.
Is it Neville?
As well. Because Neville, you would think Neville is Neville felt he was borderline for the school. His family felt he was lacking in magic. Yeah. So I think that Neville was being sorted between Hufflepuff and Gryffindor.
Yeah.
And on the edge of things, he got into Gryffindor, as we see him and his bravery in being the final winner of the House Cup at the end of the first book. It also tells you the characteristics of the people who are being sorted. Malfoy, cunning and ruthless, let's say. We don't actually know very many people in Hufflepuff and Ravenclaw ever. The two houses that we know about are Gryffindor, and there we see our Gryffindor characters: brave, courageous, daring, chivalrous. And we see the Slytherin characters. We don't see many of the characters from Ravenclaw and thing in the whole series on Hufflepuff.
Yeah, and this is a bit of a weird point, but Hermione, I don't know if it's kind of the limits of the house. The house sorting. It's very charming for the boarding school setting, but there are limits to it. It's kind of like, well, Hermione is a Ravenclaw pretty much. So you kind of get characters who exemplify those qualities within the main cast of characters who are Gryffindors, for instance.
Yeah, but what it says is that...
And you get flipping, what's his face, Peter Pettigrew. Could you get a more Slytherin-ish little weasel, little rat? And he's a Gryffindor, so it's kind of like, well...
Yeah, but basically the important thing about Gryffindor and the choice is finally about courage. It's finally about being brave.
Well, could you get a braver man than Severus Snape? As J.K. would have it. The bravery of going face to face with Voldemort. I just mean to say, like, there's loads of charm to the house sorting concept as it serves the genre of the boarding school setting, but it can only go so far, because I see characters exemplifying things that.
Yes. In other words, if you were to make a criticism, you might say that maybe there should be a bit more of the other two houses.
And you have to wonder if she wrote a book about a Ravenclaw.
But she doesn't identify with Ravenclaw.
Exactly, and I think Slytherin and Gryffindor are opposites, and antagonistic, so that's why we get so much texture on Slytherin, because that's the dynamic conflict. The other two aren't opposites, are they? Ravenclaw and Hufflepuff.
No. Let's talk a little bit about Harry's sorting, about the sorting hat and sorting Harry, because this is Harry's first public exposure to the school. So up until now, we've seen Harry only in fairly intimate surroundings, with the conversations with Hagrid, with Malfoy, with the Weasleys, on the train, a little bit with Hermione. Here, Harry is being exposed to... I tried to work out how many kids there were at... It looks as if there's about... When they get into the dormitory, there are 5 beds for boys in... there are 5 first-year boys. There's 5 beds, first years. Yeah.
Where are the rest?
They're in their own. They're in their own dormitories, I assume.
In the tower, because
yes, Gryffindor Tower. Yes.
But the girls, don't the girls go upstairs or something?
Well, they go into the common room, and the girls go one way, and the boys go another, and there's 5 boys. There's 5 beds in the dormitory.
Well, how come we've never heard about them, going into the older boys? I suppose the only time I can remember is when Fred and George or something come in and visit the...
Yeah.
So do they stay in the same room? Do they move to a different dorm as they go through the years?
How many years have we got?
7.
7 years. Yeah, but basically, all the way through, they go into the same common room. Okay? So... what I assume is that the tower has got 7 stories. Each story is a year. And so you start at the bottom, and that's the first year. And those people will stay there for 7 years. Then you go the next year.
No, for 1 year, surely.
No, I'm suggesting that it works 7 years. That you stay, because when they escape, they still go through the fat lady into their common room.
Oh, I thought you meant the dormitory.
No, the dormitory.
The common room. Yeah.
So
they'll level up through the dorms.
No, I think that they stay on the same level, and that each year a floor is vacated by the last ones, and it's filled by the first years.
I thought what you were going to say is because it's a magical turret, the floor will just move up, and the castle will just regurgitate a load of bricks and make a baseline, and then take.
There's nothing there's nothing in the stories to stop that from happening. But as I say, from a simple point of
Harry's just looking out the window is it
floor
taller this year?
Each floor has 20 students, 5 girls and 5 boys. And so then there are 70 in each house. And the 70 times 4 gives you 280, 300 students.
It's not many at all. It's a very, very small thing, isn't it?
Well, I don't know. When I was a child, my school had 300 or so students in it.
But it's the Wizarding School of Britain.
That's right.
There's no other school other than the homeschool hillbilly inbred situation that Tom Riddle's family did or whatever.
Yeah, but surely that's the point, that there aren't huge numbers of wizards.
No. There was all sorts of reasons Reddit was slagging on this, being it doesn't work, blah, 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 blah. Numbers are too small.
Well, the numbers are small.
How would it work in a regular boarding school? Would the year groups be separately accommodated type of thing?
I don't know.
It was my impression in the old schools that they were all just stuck in the dormitories together.
Yes, certainly in the Tom Brown school days, for example, they have fags. So in other words, you have a house, and the house has got a...
Gosh, for American listeners, that's not the word you think it is.
The house has got a structure with senior people. They are people who
What?
perform services.
What? Go on.
Fagging was
Oh my lord.
just get a dictionary and look up the word fag. But it also has the meaning of, if you say what a fag, it means what a
pain,
chore,
yeah.
what a pain.
Yeah.
And so a person who performs fags for someone else,
Oh.
called a fag, would be a new boy in the school, or new girl, new boy mainly in those days, who would then be a sort of Batman servant for the 5th and 6th years.
Batman?
Yes,
What's a Batman again? It's like a butler.
yes. Well, it's a military term. So Batman.
Isn't it kind of funny that Batman's butler, Alfred, is the Batman of Batman?
Yeah, exactly. But that's the sort of thing. Anyway, that in those traditional British public school environments, you did have a house, and the house was literally a
Building.
in which people went who were at the school, because the school itself would be a building, and then you would have various houses in the town which would be used to accommodate the students who were boarding.
Really?
It's
As in
just
for the boarding of the pupils, but they'd go to the main building for their
lessons.
classes. Yeah.
That's right. So they'd walk down. They'd walk down in the morning and walk back in the afternoon,
So
and
that's
things
why in
like
all those
that.
photos of like Eton, they're always like strolling around in their coattails. I was sort of looking at those thinking, why?
Well, I don't know what the situation is at Eton, but as I say, in that particular place, the houses were physically a house-like with dormitories, and you had on each floor you had arranged and studies.
And you'd have like a house master or something. Someone who
Absolutely, a
looked after
housemaster
the boys.
who would be resident in that house. One of the teachers who would be resident in that house, and it would be quite a big It could be quite a big organisation.
But you wouldn't have your lessons there.
No, your lessons wouldn't be there, but you would, there would be a common room where you could go and do your homework, and there would be studies where the senior people who were studying for particular examinations would have 2 or 3 people would share a study. And as I say, they would have the junior boys would have to do things like cleaning their shoes and providing them with service. In Tom Brown's school days, Tom Brown takes up on behalf of the junior boys who are being tortured by baddies, and
it's actually funny how Harry doesn't get tormented by older years, isn't it? Like, I think there's a nasty Quidditch captain, but no, he's not bullied by the older Slytherins, which is kind of interesting.
yeah.
So when would this have been? Like the 60s, up until the 60s or something?
And I'm sure that at Eton and places like that, they still have that
That's
sort
incredible.
of thing.
So the whole town.
I wouldn't say the whole town, but you would have certain houses in a town.
But it's much more like a
somewhere we
university
are.
sort of
Yes,
setup.
well, those schools were private schools. They were run by, they were set up by a schoolmaster who would set himself up with a school. He would rent a house, and initially he would have 2 or 3 students, and then gradually it would expand.
I've got so many questions. One last thing is, I've got so many questions. If you're living in the house with the other kids, with the other boys, with the master, in like the 1800s or whatever this is,
Or in 1960,
and if you're in the cricket team,
you play cricket for your house.
so
and
for
you
your
play...
house, it's not like the best of the school make a team that play other schools. It's
No. There's the school team, and the school team is produced from the house teams. So basically, what you've got, Tom Brown's school day is set in Rugby, the rugby school.
Where's that again?
In Rugby.
Birmingham, really?
It's between Birmingham and it's on the way from Birmingham to London, in a sense. If you go by train,
Never
you'll
been
probably
there.
pass through Rugby.
Rugby, okay.
Yeah,
Is that what the sport is named after?
absolutely.
Goodness me.
Rugby football, because it was at rugby that Webb Ellis, they were playing ordinary football, and he suddenly picked up the
decided
ball
to-
and ran with
He
it.
wanted to do so.
And they all chased after him and brought him to the ground. And that's how rugby football well, they didn't have very many
He just
rules.
felt like doing his own thing that day, and it
And
took off.
American football, what happened was that when rugby football went to America, then it got adopted in America, and the rules got changed, and American football has descended from it in that way.
And did they ever call it rugby?
No, they would never have. Well,
Why they always got to be difficult? I'm not having a go, American listeners, but anyway, all right, moving on. The other thing I have to say about Sorting Hat, why is it so scabby and mucky like the Leaky Cauldron conversation? Like
because
similar
it's
to that?
extraordinarily old.
But
It's
a
been
top
there
hat
for.
could be old, or a head of a suit of armour or something like that.
It's a witch's hat.
That's right. It's a pointy hat.
It's a pointy hat. It's been there forever, and it has been worn by, let's say, 70 students a year for 400 years. So it has been used, taken on and off 3,000 times.
That pointy hat reminds me, the pointy hat shape that's associated with witches now. It reminds me of the dunce's hat. Is that anything to do with the...
I don't think so.
why
I think
is it
it's
pointy?
more to do with the Welsh female hats. They in Wales there was a tradition of conical shaped black
Really?
hats, and the Welsh national costume involves a conical hat.
Really?
And I suspect that if you were to look at the ideas of witchcraft and foreignness, you might well find that some sort of anti-Welsh xenophobia.
Xenophobia? What's the word for like phobia of the Welsh? What would it be like?
Chimrophobia.
Chimrophobia. It just wouldn't fit if it was like a really fancy black witch's, classic witch's hat that was like really pristine. And I mean, it's to give us a sense that it's old, but it's also it's improved by grottiness. You know what I mean? Like the Leaky Cauldron, like the Wizarding World itself. It's like there's something good about the griminess.
Well, that's the patina of history.
The patina of history. That's it. That's great. That's why it smells. And we'll leave the episode there. Next episode, we'll be talking about Chapter 8, The Potions Master. If you have any comments or feedback for us, please email us at feedback@pagesweeper.com. Or if you'd like, you can leave us a comment on the YouTube channel and we'll read out any comments in the next episode. At the moment, we're just uploading the podcast to YouTube while we get things sorted out on iTunes. Please subscribe to the YouTube channel. Thank you for listening and goodbye from us at Page Sweeper. We'll see you next time.